supposed to flash. He's supposed to flash that. Okay, there. So now I'm going to hit start. Well, actually, it looks like we are started.
Right
so-
up at the top, in the blue box. Is that what we're on?
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
Recording in progress.
Good morning, everyone. I'm calling to order the Parking and Traffic Safety meeting for February 3rd, 2022. We will do an attendance call. Mary Lou McElwain.
Here.
Steve Pesci.
Yeah, you'll have more populate.
I've got to put him.
Put more.
Move them to panelists,
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
Yep. And that's the one. How do you unmute him? There we go. Ask to unmute.
Good morning, I'm here, sorry.
Not a problem. Don't see Mark. Don't see Harold. Erica Wygonick.
Here.
Police Captain Mike Maloney.
Here.
Fire Chief Todd Germain.
Here.
Public Works Director Peter Rice.
Here.
City Manager Karen Conard.
Here.
And Councilor Bagley.
Here. I'd like to make a motion to bring item 6A forward to elect a chair and vice chair, if I have a second.
I'll second that.
Why don't we, why don't we vote to bring that forward, and then if I could, if the committee feels okay, I'd like to speak to it. So, but let's first vote to bring this item forward.
Roll call.
Okay, so Mary Lou McElwain.
Yes.
Steve Pesci.
Yes?
Erica Wygonick.
Yes.
Police Captain Mike Maloney.
Yes.
Fire Chief Todd Germain.
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice.
Yes.
City Manager Karen Conard.
Yes.
And Councilor Bagley.
Yes. I would like to propose candidate for chair, Councilor Bagley, and vice chair is Steve Pesci.
I would second that.
So roll call.
We should have
If there's any discussion first.
Okay.
Yeah. I talked with Karen briefly about having a vice chairperson. The first year or two that I was on the committee, we
Yep.
did have Ted Gray was
Yep.
vice. And so I think that position needs to be defined as to what their responsibility is, because we haven't had one for years, 8 years or so. I don't have a problem with having a vice chair. I think it's good because Karen said that you're a traveler.
Yes.
So to have somebody fill in, I think in the past, has probably been the city manager, or maybe you
No,
who
it's-
filled in the past.
In the past,
as
there was
vice.
typically an assigned vice chair. In the last probably 4 years, we did not.
Oh, I remember Ted Gray.
Yeah, so I think it's appropriate.
Yeah.
It should,
Yeah.
we should have done it last year, and for whatever reason, we
Yeah,
didn't.
that's fine.
The role is really just to act as chair during the, and facilitate the meeting.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and I did request that if I was elected chair, that we have a vice chair, because I do travel for work,
Right.
and I thought it would be more efficient for the meetings. The other reason, looking through the past few years of notes, it does seem historically the counselor nominee has been the chair, but as me and the past counselors that have recently been chair, we're brand new to the committee.
Yep.
So I thought it'd be important that the vice chair be somebody that's been here for a long time, so that we have some institutional knowledge in that position.
Good. I'm fine with that. I just wanted to clarify.
Is Steve fine with that?
I'm happy to step in and serve the role to help the committee function. I think it's a good idea to have it for consistency, and I hope that my services will be helpful.
Great.
Good call.
If there's no other comments, we could do a roll call vote.
Mary Lou McElwain.
Yes.
Steve Pesci.
I probably should abstain.
Well, from yours, but you could vote for the,
Do we want to
The
vote
chair.
I
on
will
them
vote for the
separately?
motion, yes.
or, yeah,
I support-
maybe it should be two separate motions.
Okay.
First motion being for the chair.
So Mary Lou McElwain.
Yes.
Steve Pesci.
Yes.
Erica Wygonick.
Yes.
Police Captain Mike Maloney.
Yes.
Fire Chief Todd Germain.
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice.
Yes.
City Manager Karen Conard.
Yes.
And I'll abstain.
And
So-
Councilor Bagley will abstain.
Councilor Bagley will abstain.
So the second motion would be to have Steve Pesci as vice chair, and I need a second.
I'll second that.
Roll call vote. Mary Lou McElwain.
Yes.
Steve Pesci. Abstain.
Abstain.
Erica Wagonic.
Yes.
Police Captain Mike Maloney.
Yes.
Fire Chief Todd Germain.
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice.
Yes.
City Manager Karen Conard.
Yes.
And Councilor
Yes.
Bagley.
Great. Thank you.
Chairman Bagley, actually.
I just have one comment. I thought Mark said that he was going to zoom in from Florida.
I don't see him.
See him? Okay. All right.
So at this point, I'm going to share the screen.
Mr. Chairman, you can take it away.
I guess item number 3, financial report.
That's typically Ben, who would walk us through the,
Okay, so financial report this time at 50% of the year gone by as of December 31st. We have 62% of our budgeted funds in, which is great news. Just about every line item is ahead of schedule, and the ones that are not are basically right on schedule. So we're having a good year so far.
Sounds great. Item 4, public comment.
We need to move to accept.
And it
Move to
should say it
accept.
on here. I'll second that. We should take a roll call since we're
Roll
not
call
all
vote.
in the room.
Mary Lynn McElwain.
Yes.
Steve Pesci.
Yes.
Erica Wagonic.
Yes.
Police Captain Mike Maloney.
Yes.
Fire Chief Todd Germain.
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice.
Yes.
City Manager Karen Conard.
Yes.
And Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Yes. Okay, now I guess we move on to item 4, which is public comment. Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak today?
Jonathan Sandberg has his
We
hand.
do have a hand up.
Okay.
Does anybody out here want to speak today?
We're just going to go with the room first, and then we'll switch to the people on Zoom.
Hi, my name is Liza Hewitt, and I live at 726 Middle Road. I'm here today to discuss speed limits and traffic calming. For some of you who are new to this committee, I first came before this committee with a letter in July of 2020 with concerns about speed and traffic calming on Middle Road. I asked that the speed limit be lowered to 25 and that other traffic calming measures be considered. No action was taken, and I came back before you on October 7th, 2020, with a petition signed by over 50 neighbors asking that the speed limit be lowered to 25 miles per hour. The committee decided to instead institute a pilot program of traffic calming measures that were put into effect last spring. I came before this committee last September to ask if a review would be done of the pilot program to judge if it had worked to reduce speeds, and I was told that a review would be done. To the best of my knowledge, that has not happened before. That did not happen before the traffic calming measures were removed for winter. I was also told that the pilot was an interim measure and that Middle Road traffic calming was in the CIP for 2023. Middle Road has now been moved out to 2026. Now here I am again. The Middle Road Speedway is still clocking speeds regularly over 40 miles per hour, and it speeds up over 50 miles per hour at times. I've consistently asked you over the past year and a half to consider making no speed on a residential road over 25 miles per hour. When I watched your last meeting, you had discussed reviewing all city road speeds and whether instituting a consistent speed limit of 25 miles per hour for all roads was appropriate. That's not what I suggested. I've consistently heard from this committee that I live on an arterial road and that 30 miles per hour is appropriate. I live in a neighborhood, one that consists of approximately 138 residences of walkers, cyclists, and drivers. Portsmouth has many residential gateway roads that are 25 miles per hour. Beverly Hill, Woodbury Avenue, Maplewood, Miller Avenue, Middle Street, which was lowered to 25 only last year. I don't understand why all residential gateway roads are 25 miles per hour except for Middle Road, Islington, and Sagamore. Why is it that the residents in these neighborhoods are not worthy of the same consideration for safety that others are? I understand that you are currently studying the speed limits on all city streets and that you are coming up with a plan, although I don't think you were clear at the last meeting what the plan is going to accomplish. I can't believe that residents will be happy with their speed limits being raised, so the only other option is that you are considering lowering speed limits. If that is the case, I would like you to explain why the residents of Middle Road, Islington, and Sagamore are not worthy of a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair?
Yes.
Typically, we don't have interaction, but I want to clarify one thing for Eliza. The traffic calming on Middle Road was not pushed to 2026. It's clearly in the, if you look at TSM 21 PW 70 on the current CIP, it's 2023. And actually, it was in 2024 the year before, but through your efforts, we pulled it forward to 2023. And it's currently shown in that, and you'll see clearly in there that it refers to, these measures may include reconfigurations, speed tables, intersections, Middle Road, South Street, and Aldrich Road. And that's $300,000 that's been requested for that street.
Okay.
So I just wanted to clarify and to,
I
assure you
appreciate
that
that.
this wasn't, pushed off to some future year.
Okay, that's not how I read the CIP, so I'll
it's
have to go back and look.
TSM 21 PW 70.
Okay, so we can expect
Page
something will be
131.
coming up?
Assuming it gets adopted as is, that's.
Yeah, as you know, our traffic engineer left. So we've been short-staffed relative to review. Additional data has been collected, and we have not disregarded this request. We are not ignoring it. We know it's an important thing. So I appreciate your frustration, but I want you to know that this hasn't been ignored and hasn't been just decided to be blown off.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you. Ken Goldman?
Thank you. Ken Goldman, 271 Islington Street. I have a new request for the committee. I live on Islington between Cornwall and Rockingham, and for some reason they're both one way going the same way. They both go from Islington down to McDonough, and it would be really convenient for the people who live there to have one going one way, one going the other way. Just make it easier for access to our community and probably the other homes on those streets. So I would just like to ask the committee to take a look into that and consider making that change. Thank you.
Thank you. And
Given that we don't have anybody else here, we have 2 hands raised, 3 hands raised. There you go, Jessica. Kevin, can you please enable Jonathan Sandberg?
Hey guys, nice to see you. You guys can hear me, right?
We can.
Yep.
Okay, great. Hey, so I'm Jonathan Sandberg. I live at 160 Bartlett Street. I want to talk today about the intersection of Kate and Bartlett, which I know has gotten a lot of attention in the past, but I feel like it's fallen off the radar a little bit. And there's a lot of improvements that could easily be made. Starting off with the fact that coming from Kate Street, there's a stop sign and there's a stop bar, and the stop bar is after the crosswalk. And it's almost a joke that you'd have a stop bar after the crosswalk. If you're a pedestrian and a car comes to the stop at the stop bar, you cannot cross the street. There's a car in the way. It makes no sense. That's got to be it's almost it's laughable. And then the next thing is I've spoken about this a lot. I'm going to repeat it. Is that the slip lane coming up part of the street is not appropriate at that location. It's unsafe. Slip lanes are attributed to highways. They're what you do when you're emphasizing flow over safety. We don't have them in any other place in Portsmouth that I'm aware of, except for where Beverly Hill meets. Can't remember, but there's a stop sign. There's a stop sign at the end of that slip lane, so cars at that intersection are not through. And then the other place is at Borthwick, the end of Borthwick, and the last I remember, we're getting rid of that. And those are good things. That's what you should be doing. When I asked Peter Rice about this at the neighborhood meeting in October, he responded with saying that was necessary to have the split lane to prevent queuing at the intersection backing up. And that's an answer that's consistent with prioritizing flow over safety. What would be far more safer and appropriate would just to have the cars go around and take a hard right instead of that soft right. And all that would do is make cars slow down, and it wouldn't impede. So that's that. And then the third thing is coming down Bartlett Street. There's the road is 3 lanes wide, and that's really unnecessary. It doesn't need to be 3 lanes wide. There's a lane coming up the street, there's a lane coming down to turn left, and there's a lane going down to turn right. And almost no cars turn right there. The only traffic that turns right are the trucks coming from Ritchie Lumber. Everybody else is coming from Woodbury, and there's no reason to turn right onto 8th Street to get to the bypass because they've already passed the traffic circle on Woodbury. So the road is unnecessarily wide, and that's a space that could be used for lots of other things like pedestrian or even bicycle facility. And that gets me to the third point. You guys read in the fourth point, rather, you guys read in the news that the developers at 105 Bartlett were successful in their appeal, and it seems more likely than not that 105 will be developed, and we will finally have the path on the North Mill Pond, and that presents an enormous opportunity to create a connection across from Kate Street, which has a very nice multi-use path on it now. There's got to be a connection to get across Bartlett Street to the North Mill Pond Trail, and it seems to me that the best way to do that is, instead of having people have to turn cross 8th Street and then cross again Bartlett Street, which is what I think you have in mind, it'd be much easier if they could just stay to the left and go up the road where there's now a car lane, the right turn lane I was just speaking of. You just go up and have a multi-use path just continue, and then have a crossing right at the driveways. That's a vision that I think would make a lot of sense. But at any rate, something you should think about. Those are my current concerns about the intersection, Peyton and Bartlett, and I hope you'll keep those thoughts in your mind going forward. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Would Kevin please recognize Robin Russo? You're on mute, Robin.
Thank you. I don't often attend these meetings, so it's shocking for me to see that city management is having a voting position on this committee. This is supposed to be a subcommittee of the city council. So I'm asking our city councilor, Andrew Bagley, to look into why we have city management in voting positions on this committee. I do a lot of work with public companies and audit committees. We would never have members of management on subcommittees of a board of directors. So why is this true here? These should be members of and residents of the city of Portsmouth who have voting privileges on this committee. But that's not really why I'm here. I'm just shocked to see it as I'm showing up. I'm here because I had a meeting on the 27th with the head of the Governor's Council on Disabilities, because the city of Portsmouth is not in compliance with RSA, section 265.74, parking privileges for those with walking disabilities, or it basically states that all people with basically handicap placards have free parking. And to use the guidance from this particular committee, if you want to charge or have time limits on those spaces. And back in October, we had a change to a 3-hour limit, at least downtown, that I know of, for people with handicap placards. And a whole lot of us got, I had $300 worth of parking tickets that piled up on my car. So we are not in violation, we are in violation of that guidance because it says that handicap placards should have double the time. If you're going to set a time limit, thank you very much, it should be double the time limit that a regular vehicle would have because people need extra time to deal with that. And so I'm asking that you, number one, change that rule immediately, and number two, issue a refund to those people that were taken advantage of by the city who have already disabilities and challenges. Also, I'm asking that you keep this meeting more at 6 to 7 p.m. on a weeknight and not 8 a.m. in the morning when nobody from the public can really attend it. So that's all I have to say today. Oh yes, and resident permit parking in Market Square. We're waiting for that pilot program to end and we want to be next on the list. I'm happy to work with DPW. I've got certain streets that I think need to have those resident parking signs, and those are where we have the majority of non-deeded buildings without parking, that these buildings are challenged. So I'm waiting for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin, please recognize Jessica Lozan.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hi. Thanks for all coming out yesterday. I'm sorry, I was unaware. I just misunderstood that you guys were all coming to that, so I was a little unprepared. I did send some information to a few of you that I had emails with, but yesterday I did measure the width of Austin Street in front of my house, and it's 17 feet wide. And I did look up, like the Chevy Tahoe that was there, that was 90 inches, which is 7 feet. So basically, I have 10 feet. If that Tahoe was parked back where people park, so like a good 5 or 6 feet in reverse from where it was, that gives us like less than 10 feet to make that switch around if we have to turn out of our driveway. I did go down to across Union Street, Austin Street down there. Someone had mentioned yesterday, they said that that was a normal street in Portsmouth, and just, I understand there's a lot of small streets in Portsmouth, they just don't all have parking on them. And down the street on Austin, across Union, I measured 28 feet. So there's a significant, 11 feet difference in front of my house to like the street that we're just on. My neighbor, Patty, had a good suggestion that I hadn't thought of. She thought of just putting a sign up there that says, "Do not block driveways." Then it wouldn't take away any of the parking that's already there, the 2 spots. And the other thing that I sent some pictures, there's some sort of paint on the road on McDonough Street and on Hanover Street. It's basically just like a triangle with paint. And if that was there, I think people would not park there. I think just, some way to sort of alert people to look over and say, oh, like that car won't be able to get out if I park here. I did send a bunch of pictures of just the past 2 months, even Christmas Eve, we got stuck. Well, I had my mother here, and it was super inconvenient because it was raining and icing. So if you guys could just look at those pictures, those show. I wish I had the fire chief backed up, because where his car was, we can obviously get around. It's when someone parks behind him. It's that third car that blocks us in. So if you have any more questions, let me know, and hopefully we can figure something out. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Please recognize Michael Milliken. Mr. Milliken, you're on mute.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning. This is Mike Milliken. I'm tweeting for Newcastle Avenue. I have a question to follow up to the Middle Road conversation that the other speaker brought up. Back in 2019, I started having conversations with Eric Eby about Newcastle Avenue, where I live. I live right kind of like along the seawall. It's sort of a long straightaway, and it's a bountiful spot for speeding. And Eric installed a stealth recorder in front of the house, and then that justified a speed feedback sign, and I believe that's been helpful. But one of the things he told me is that Newcastle Avenue, being an arterial route, is not eligible for traffic calming measures beyond speed feedback signs and speed enforcement. And I wonder if we could get clarification on, number one, what are the arterial routes in Portsmouth that are affected by any kind of restrictions for speed calming, and what are the speed calming measures that can be put into place? Because there seems to be confusion over that, and I think if we could clarify that, it would be helpful. And by the way, I chair a Facebook group called Safer Streets Portsmouth. We have about 180 members who are very committed to this topic, and I'd be happy to distribute every information through that group. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Well, we have no more hands raised. Mr. Chairman, if you close public session.
Yeah, I'll close the public comment session. Thank you for everyone that spoke. Next, we have site visits. 273 Austin Street. One of the public speakers spoke on this 2 days ago now, I believe, at 8 a.m. We had quite a few of us show up there to evaluate the site. I think it's appropriate for me to mention, in not every community would you have the city manager, the fire chief, a police captain, the head of public works, the head of parking, traffic engineer, and then numerous committee members show up at 8 a.m. To evaluate somebody's driveway. So I think it gives great credit to the city of Portsmouth that we have such an involvement. Often the decisions we make may not be pleasing to everybody, but I think it shows the care and effort and communication that the city takes pride in. So I want to comment on that. And then I would look to entertain a motion regarding the site visit.
Motion to just acknowledge that we were at the site visit. Okay. Make a motion that we were at the site visit and that it's up for discussion.
For discussion, I'll second that.
I feel like sometimes we have a recap of the site visit.
Right, for people
Yeah.
who weren't there.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable doing that?
Sure. So this site, we've actually looked at a couple of times before, and we understand the challenge of navigating parking in the area and getting in and out of a narrow driveway to a narrow street. And the question really comes down to balancing access and parking. So the options that were looked at was if you strictly interpret the setbacks from intersection and setback from driveways, it quickly shows that there's remaining about 18 feet left for one parking space. So the options that have been floated out there include, striping, putting a triangular piece to offset the driveway that is across the street from this property to allow for more easy access in and out. Putting a sign up saying "Do not block driveway" may be one approach. It doesn't definitively restrict parking one way or the other. The other third approach would really be, striping it out with an offset and putting signage that's saying "Do not park near a stop sign," as well as driveway. So I guess we're out there. We all understand the challenges, and there was no definitive consensus at the site visit.
Please recognize Steve Pesci, raised hand.
Thank you, Peter. I agree with that synopsis. I hope that when the staff is able to mark out on paper what it would look like having the, what we keep referring to as the triangular lines, the setback lines, I would hope that would address the majority of concerns for the resident. I feel really strongly about this balance issue Peter's talking about. No disagreement that there's inconvenience for the private property owner, but we have to balance that against the fact that it's a public street and a public right-of-way, and the public has a right to park in legally designated parking areas, 20-foot setback notwithstanding. So I'm hoping when this is drawn out on paper that it's a legitimate compromise, and I think we all want to avoid having a sea of signs put up. I always say that if you applied all those standards everywhere in the city, we would have just a forest of signs and pavement markings. So hopefully when we see a drawing scaled out, it will accommodate most, if not all, of the concerns of the resident.
Thank you.
Motion?
Is that a motion?
I don't know if it's ready for a motion. I'd like to see the drawing from the staff and see if that's acceptable, but I think the staff already agreed that they were going to proceed on that work effort.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
I was going to say, I think I hear there's maybe a motion for a report back from staff on this.
If a motion's warranted, certainly I make that, yes.
I'll second that.
Mr. Chair, I agree with Steve's evaluation of the site visit, and I think it's really important for us to hear other residents who live in that area who might be parking there, because I think we've done this before. We have put a parking or no parking signs wherever it's appropriate, but I think we continue to set a precedent that can occur within the city on many streets, many narrow streets. So I think Steve's suggestion is a good one. Let's go for it.
Appreciate that. If I can make a comment to it, when we have planning type activities, there's a butter notice that go out. In the report back, if we were going to suggest some changes, I might add that, letting the neighbors know through notice that these changes are being proposed might be a good idea. We don't want to take away parking and then have nobody on the street know why. I think if everybody knows going in what's happening and why, it might be better received if there is in fact a change.
So I would be willing to amend that if the motion, the person making the motion agrees.
Yes.
So I'll amend that to
Thank
like
you.
that.
And I guess we'll take a roll call vote unless there's further discussion.
Mary Lou McElwain,
Yes.
Steve Pesci,
Yes.
Erica Wagonic,
Yes.
Police Captain Mike Maloney,
Yes.
Fire Chief Todd Germain,
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice,
Yes.
City Manager Karen Conard,
Yes.
Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Yes.
So moved.
Okay, and moving on to the next item in the agenda is new business. We've already covered item A. Item B, I think, has been discussed about in public comment, and the sample motion is to discuss options for upcoming calendar. If somebody would like to.
Gotcha.
I'll tee it up for discussion. Typically, the group discusses what makes the most sense for meeting time. And as chair, I think you are one voice in the conversation that may want to start the conversation and maybe take it from there. Take it to the non-city members after that.
Yeah, I guess I'll start the discussion, and 8 a.m. is difficult for a lot of people, because of work schedules, dropping kids off at school. For me personally, I would prefer something in the afternoon or evening. I think the evening might be a bit much because we have so many city staff on this committee, which is important. So I think I certainly would be in favor of an afternoon meeting, which I think might be easier for members of the public to attend. And then, if need be, for instance, say the neighborhood parking program, we could potentially schedule special meetings or certain months have the meetings be in the evening so that more people can attend for really matters of interest to the general public. But I think our regular scheduled meetings, 8 a.m. is, from my perspective, not ideal.
Mr. Chair, I don't think there's an ideal time, actually. We've found that over the years that we can schedule it when Peter had his boat out in the summer and we would do afternoon meetings. The attendance wasn't any different from an 8 a.m. I'm just thinking about the other people who are on this committee. If you schedule an 8 a.m., that's the start of their day. If you try to break up at 2:30 or 3:30 or 4:30, I would wonder if it's more difficult for the members of the city staff to attend. Also, it's a hard time for parents. Erica can comment on the morning or the afternoon. I don't know if people who have children can attend an afternoon or an early evening meeting.
Yeah, I think I agree with Mary Lou that there's lots of tricks to any particular time. I think 8 a.m. is tricky, but I do appreciate that it's kind of at one end of the day. And I think it's nice that it's one end of the day that children are occupied. If we went to the other end of the day, then I think there's after school, and that poses different challenges. I'm just one of many. I do think that potentially right at 8 is tricky for people to get to because they're dropping kids off or getting in and starting their day. So I guess 8:15 to me is an ideal time where it gives people time to at least, I think about members of the public who are trying to get their kids to school and then come to a meeting, and at least it gives them time to do that. I do worry that later in the afternoon either breaks up the day a lot, or you have the other situation where kids are not even in school, and then that's harder. Or, nighttime is tricky because it's busy. But I guess I like the idea of occasional night meetings to support particular interests. I don't know. I think we probably all have a preferred time, but
Yeah. Do you want to ask Steve what he thinks?
Yeah, Steve, do you have your hand up? Do you have a preference?
He's a pain.
I'm flexible either, but I do like either beginning of day or end of day. Maybe the 8 a.m. is a little stressful, as Erica's saying, for people to get all their logistics, family logistics done. So maybe 8:30, or maybe later in the afternoon, like 3 o'clock, 3:30. But I'm flexible.
And I guess, I think it's important that we have the fire chief here and the police captain here. So do you guys have thoughts on what?
I have a conflict on the evenings of the first Thursday in the month, a recurring meeting in the evening today, each month, but any other time during the day is fine with me.
Same goes, evenings get a little bit tougher, but if I couldn't make it, I could always have somebody fill in for me. But sometimes the length of these meetings can go an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours in some cases. So if you're starting in the afternoon, you might be finishing in the early evening, depending on it. But not that important either way. We would have somebody here.
Anybody else have thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, I'll read in for those who received the email from member Mark Syracusa that his consideration would be for the afternoon hours. Just want to put that on the record. He's not here to mention that. I guess I would speak for Peter and Ben and Tyler and myself that we would make ourselves available to the committee.
So I guess what I'm hearing is that the morning meetings seem to be best for most members, but maybe we adjust the time to 8:15 or 8:30. Is that the consensus, or would you prefer we propose an afternoon meeting first? I think we have to propose either morning or afternoon.
Toss a coin.
And if we continue to have the meetings in the morning, I think if we have a couple meetings a year that are in the evening, that will address at least some of the concerns about people not being able to get here. But I think it's unrealistic to schedule all these meetings in the evening just because of the requirements of staff and conflicts with other meetings going on within the city, such as planning board, HDC, zoning board of adjustment. We run into an issue where evenings are already stressed with a number of meetings. So if we just do a couple meetings a year in the evening, and then if somebody made a motion for meetings in the morning or the afternoon, I guess we could vote on it.
I just wanted to comment that we have Zoom, which does make a difference for people in the general public who want to weigh in. So, so we're negating evening meetings, and we're just choosing between the option of morning or afternoon. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I'm suggesting that we have our regular scheduled meeting either in the morning or the afternoon,
Okay.
and then maybe twice a year we have an evening meeting, or as when we have, if we feel that there's an issue that might get a lot of response. I used the example of the neighborhood parking program because I know that tends to bring people out.
Right.
We might try to have a meeting in the evening from time to time for those types of topics.
Sure.
I'll make a motion
Okay.
that we meet at 8:30 most of the time, and make special efforts to have evening meetings when we feel like it would support a vibrant public discussion for a particular focus issue.
I'll second that.
Good.
I think that's the perfect motion.
Roll call. Mary Lou McElwain,
Yes.
Steve Pesci,
Yes.
Erica Wagonic,
Yes.
Police Captain Mike Maloney,
Yes.
Fire Chief Todd Germain,
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice,
Yes.
City Manager Karen Conard,
Yes.
and Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Yes.
So moved.
Okay, item C's already been addressed. Item D, 21 Brewster Street, request for improved parking signage to denote only one available space as painted, sample motion, review recommended signage and placement.
Go ahead, Ben.
If it please the Chair.
Yes.
So this is a space that used to house 2 vehicles, but technically it only is striped for one. That's difficult for people to see when the snow is on the ground. So when the snow falls, apparently the neighbors believe that there's a preponderance of people double parking in that area. They would like to see some signage as marked in the green areas here to show that there's only one space available in this spot in front of 21 Brewster. So signage sample would look something like this.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes.
Where I understand the concern relative to this, I am concerned about additional signage on tight sidewalks that are already challenging for staff to maintain during the winter. And, you know, I would say that with snow removal and paint on the road, it should be adequate, even during the winter time, to be able to see that it's a single parking space. So I would make a motion that we table this and we put it on, put it on file. It really, I mean, it's currently, per ordinance, it's structured this way. It's a single parking space, so there really is no additional action needed by the committee. It's something that it's more of an administrative thing. It's a matter of if we find that we need to have signage out there after a while of observing it, then we can take that action. But at this point, I don't think the additional signage would be beneficial to the neighborhood and the ability to maintain the sidewalks.
Thank you.
So my motion would be to table this.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
I would just like to comment on when residents have an issue such as this, that we make a suggestion that the residents try to show up at the meeting or at Zoom so that we can have a discussion. We will know better as to what is the actual issue that we're trying to deal with. You know, I think we need some background information from the building owner, the person who is requesting this. So I'm just asking in general if people have items that go on our agenda that when those come in, that we suggest to them that they either come in person to a meeting or Zoom in so that we can have a better discussion.
I think that makes sense, and if we do in fact table this, it could come back up.
Yeah.
So if that resident is listening to this, or building owner, I think that's pretty good advice to get in touch with us if you want this re-brought back up.
No.
Oh, go ahead.
One of the things, I feel like this comes up with some frequency, and I agree that we can't have a sign every time people aren't adhering to the parking guidance. I think it's a little bit easier for us because we talk about parking and offsets so often to remember what the rules are in terms of how close you can park to things. But I'm guessing the general public is less attuned to those things just because it's not what they talk about once a month for a couple hours. I was wondering if maybe this is something that we could add to the city or public works social media, like periodically, hey, now that it's winter, just a reminder, not that it's only true in the winter, but it's just a good opportunity to put a casual, friendly, just a reminder, you're only allowed to park within X number of feet of certain things. And maybe periodically we could cycle messages like that through. Not everyone pays attention to social media, but I think it's a pretty decent way to get a friendly, casual message out. You know, I don't think we're gonna put a big sign up when you enter town, make sure you park a certain distance away. That might get a little too in the way, but I feel like these are rules that are out there, but maybe not as well known, and if we increase people's general awareness of it, that might help. This particular location, I think, might be as much, you know, it's not necessarily just a neighbor that they could go to remind them or talk to the neighbor. I think there's more kind of general public parking in this location, so I think it's more of a community awareness issue than, you know, we can't just encourage them to chat with their neighbors to remind them.
So, any more discussion on the motion, or do we want to amend the motion?
I just want to kind of amplify what Eric is saying about kind of cultural awareness and sympathetic to Peter's point. I mean, people say, oh, it's just a sign, it's not a big deal, but it becomes a long-term maintenance issue. And honestly, as long as the paint is kept on the ground, which I hope it will be, reality is 90% of the time the pavement markings are visible. And if we could get to 90% visible awareness of the regulation without putting the vertical signs in, which become just problematic and expensive, I think that's always the preferable way. So.
Okay, thank you. Shall we call for a vote?
Okay, so Mary Lou McElwain,
Yes.
Steve Pesci,
Yes.
Erica Wyconic,
Yes.
Police Captain Mike Maloney,
Yes.
Fire Chief Todd Germain,
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice,
Yes.
City Manager Karen Conard,
Yes.
and Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Luke.
I'll have staff go out and take a look at that area. And, you know, if people are illegally parking, you know, we have regular parking enforcement in that area, so we can, you know, we can,
I'm certain that's already part of what's happening.
okay.
Okay, so next, request for RRFB at Dennett and Maplewood.
So, please, the Chair.
Oh, yes.
Just to clarify, RFB is a rapid flashing beacon. The notation is not here that way, just to make sure everybody's aware what that is. The crosswalk lights?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. So I'd entertain a motion on,
Where are we at this, excuse me,
oh, yeah, go ahead.
we just discussed this. Is this request came up, are we going to put this in? Has this been accepted?
Please, the Chair.
Okay, so it's a request that's come up from neighbors?
Maybe we
from-
can
I know
hear,
that
we can hear about it.
Please, the Chair.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
yeah, this is a neighbor request, and typically what happens in these situations, we would put out a camera that would measure the amount of foot traffic, and there are some guidelines nationally and statewide that will help us understand whether or not a beacon is warranted in that area. So the discussion here would really be about at what time frame do we feel it's appropriate to put that out. There's a lot more foot traffic in the spring and summer than there is at this time. So the numbers we gather now might not be as effective or as appropriate as numbers we might gather a little bit later in the year. So staff would typically put that out and then report back.
Steve has his hand up.
Oh, Steve?
I think this is an excellent candidate for review, so I would like to make a motion that the staff, after the middle of April, put out the appropriate recording devices to measure pedestrian volumes and vehicle speeds and see if this meets a logical criteria for RRFB. Just the sidebar, you know, one of those things we've talked about is setting up some set of criteria for these as the requests for these come in. So hopefully this can help us in that process.
So that's a motion.
Yes.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? I'll just, I've got a few comments kind of to Steve's point. I think, these started appearing, I guess, about 5 years ago. And it does seem that most people in town, that if they use a crosswalk, they would love to have one of these. So I think it's important for us to, when residents identify areas that they would like these, we should evaluate them. But it might be good to have some criteria, and setting up that recording device, knowing the number of people that use the crosswalk, things like that, could really guide us so we don't end up with too many of them, or worse, some in areas that aren't so great and none in areas that could use them better, just because of the way that they come in is a little bit random, the requests.
Please, Chair.
Yes.
I'm aware that there are specific guidelines, so when this data is presented, we'll make sure that that is part of the presentation.
Great, thank you. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I think what we'll do is I think it's a good suggestion to have that, and I think we probably should present that information to the committee and make it accessible for people. So we'll post it on our section of the website, but we'll make sure the committee has that as well. One thing to note is that there's a lot more than just pedestrian counts associated with an intersection like this. This is a very challenging intersection. Sight distances are very challenging. There's oftentimes a lot of speed coming over that hill, and I wouldn't want to imply that putting up a rapid flashing beacon creates a safer intersection. It does improve visibility. However, I think this intersection needs to be viewed as a whole. And prior to making any, I'm not making an amendment, but I think we will report back and look at this intersection more thoroughly in addition to if a rapid flashing beacon is appropriate.
Thank you. I guess if there's no further discussion, I'll call for a roll call vote.
Mary Lou McElwain?
Yes.
Steve Pesci?
Yes.
Erica Wygonick?
Yep.
Police Captain Mike Maloney?
Yes.
Fire Chief Todd Germain?
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice?
Yes.
City Manager Karen Conard?
Yes.
And Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Yes.
So moved.
Okay, old business, I'm seeing that there's none. And informational items, monthly accident report from the police.
Chief?
So if you look at December, we have 99 total crashes for the month and 71 reportable crashes, none involving pedestrians, none involving bicycles. And Mr. Chairman, just for your clarification, as far as the total crashes versus reportable. So a reportable crash is characterized as a crash that has an estimated damage of cumulative $1,000 or more. So a little paint transfer, a little bumper, the state doesn't require an accident report in that sense. So when we say reportable versus non-reportable, some of your smaller, minor damage accidents, those are property damage but don't require a report. So that's just a little bit clarification on the two different numbers and how we got those. I just also wanted to follow up last month's meeting. There was talk about some crash data at two intersections. One was Market Street at Nobles Island, and the other one was State Street at Union Street. The discussion came up about possibly putting no prohibited U-turn signs at Market Street at Nobles Island, and the request was, can we research if there are any crashes caused by illegal U-turns there? In the last 5 years, I found none. In fact, it was maybe two crashes at that intersection, period, but none of them involved illegal U-turn. And also State Street at Union Street. I think there was also perhaps adding a third stop sign, a four-way stop at that intersection as well. And again, last 5 years of data there, no reportable crashes at State and Union. So a little bit aside from the monthly report, but that was something that was talked about some items last month to look at, and that's what I was able to find. So.
Thank you. And I guess I would comment on the stop signs at Union. We're about to, if I'm correct, Mr. Public Works Director, undergo a pretty big project on Union Street. So.
Yeah, the schedule on that is probably, we're in design right now. It's probably this time next year, we'll probably be looking to get geared up for construction. So there'll be a year before any action's out there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And I guess thank you for that report. And next is bike and vehicular traffic data.
Okay, so this is the traffic data at Market Street and Nobles. It basically shows the typical downward curve towards the wintertime. I'm certain that we'll see it come back up. The numbers versus last year are significantly higher, and so that's what the next graphic shows as well. So if it pleases the chair, I'll move on to the next one.
Yes, please.
So this one is from South and Middle, and it shows this graph was intended to show the difference between 2019 and 2021, obviously excluding year 2020 for COVID reasons. So at this point, it's probably prudent for the committee or the director and myself to discuss whether or not to continue this report. As we move into 2020, the data will not look like it won't be very usable. So
I leave it to the committee whether they would like to continue to see this data. You know, we won't stop collecting it. It'll be available. But if the committee if this is helpful to the committee, you know, I would think that you know, I'd leave it to the committee if they want to continue to see this data.
Please, Chair.
Yes.
We can always go out and retrieve any date range for most of these devices. I've learned. So whether we do a continued report each week or each month, I should say, is one option. The other option is if we have a directive to go out and retrieve data for a specific time period, we'd be able to do so.
Yes.
I think Steve had his hand up, but I'm going to go first because I'm here. Sorry, Steve. I like seeing it. Steve just said twice a year would be great for calibration.
Sure.
I think that's good. I think it's helpful to see where we stand versus 2019. I wouldn't want to keep moving forward and compare 2022 to 2020.
Exactly.
You know, I think we'd want to keep just a sense. I don't know if we need to see the graph necessarily or just a number. You know, we're currently at 85% of where we were in 2019, or I mean, that to me is what's most interesting. Is kind of that sense of, are we still below those numbers? Because I think it does seem like this is steady state. If this is steady state, that changes some of our pinch points, takes some of the pressure off. If we are getting back to that, that starts to change back to 2019 levels. I think we would see different things happening in town.
Please, Chair. So we do have parking data that helps us understand that as well, so that we could use the parking data to understand our return to normalcy, so to speak, and then have the committee decide whether or not we want to extend that data collection out at any given point, and then choose which intersections we want to look at, like Market and Nobles or this one here. So I think that's a great idea. We do have daily data that shows where our traffic data is on the downtown with parking. So that helps.
Does Steve have his hand raised? Go ahead, Steve, if you're out there.
Actually, it was not about this issue, though. I was asleep when we went through old business, and I wanted to circle back on something.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
So naughty.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, we were still on this item.
Yes, okay.
You know, why don't we next month we'll continue with the data and we can have this further. So staff will report back next month.
Okay, go ahead, Steve.
I'm sorry I missed the old business thing. I wanted to ask Peter, and given the public comment, where are we on the Bartlett and Hodgson Brook intersection work? Will that start this spring? Can you give us an update on that?
Yes, the comments that Jonathan made were not necessarily what the final intersection configuration is going to look like. The stop bar is going to be relocated. The crosswalk is going to be relocated. I disagree with him, and the engineering reports and reviews have continued to show the value of that slip lane and the necessity of the configuration. And I know there's engineers can have a difference of opinion, but the area as configured is not final. There'll be additional signage and there'll be an adjustment to where the crosswalks are to improve visibility. And so it's not done yet. So that's the answer. And yes, it'll be done in the spring.
And I appreciate the amount of time that the city staff and councilors have put into this, and I look forward to seeing the project. Just one other old business thing, and again, it was raised earlier by public comment, but We had talked earlier about setting up a group to look at speed limits overall, and I apologize that I guess we were looking to establish a working group, and the holidays came. But I wanted to ask the chair and the committee about best strategy or approach on that, and is it appropriate to establish a working group to meet with staff to lay out kind of an overview of this concept of setting out some goals for evaluating speed limits rationally citywide and coming back to the committee with observations and thoughts? Is a working group an appropriate method to move this process along?
Please, Chair.
Yes.
So on 3.3, the docket for March, we do have a presentation scheduled for where we're at with our city and where each street is at now, and then we can move. That's designed to move the discussion forward into this next stage.
Okay. Well, I'm certainly happy if it's helpful to have a working meeting with staff to prepare for that March 3rd. I'm certainly happy to participate in that, because I agree with the comments of the public that have attended. This has been a long time being discussed, and we need to move forward. And I want to acknowledge Mr. Hewitt sent a graphic on this issue to us, which kind of gets at the same visualization and logic review that we're all talking about. So I think patience, but I'm certainly happy to step in and have a working meeting or two with staff if it would help prepare for that March 3rd.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes.
Staff is more than willing to include a working group in this discussion prior to that meeting. I think it would be helpful. One important thing to remember, and there's a lot of work that's been done leading up to this discussion, and on the city's website there is some really good documentation relative to complete streets, demonstration project policy, complete street design guidelines that have been accepted, and so that helps. And it's a citywide review of all city streets has been done to a certain extent, not speed limits, and it doesn't clearly define the types of treatments that are allowed in different types of designations, which I think would be a really useful summary for people, and we'll pull something like that together. But I would point people to it's the Complete Streets program. If you go to the city's website, and there's a lot of good documentation there that's been done. Unfortunately, the folks that were very much involved in it have both left the city, so it's a matter of like any documents, any programs, they're living documents. They need to be brought up to speed at times, and these are obviously dated things that would really warrant some revisit. So I look forward to having this discussion further, and I think it's appropriate.
Okay, so it sounds like those will be items probably on the agenda for next month.
That's correct.
Any further comment? So last, parking, traffic, and safety action items?
So this is just a spreadsheet that we keep. We don't normally throw it in here, but just to give you, Councilor Bagley and Chairman Bagley, an opportunity to look at all of the items we've been discussing and where they're at. Some of them are quite old, some of them are current, and we just keep this to make sure that the meeting schedules stay on cue.
So I might make a comment to that. Would this be something that we'd want to put available online on the committee page so there's more awareness of what's been discussed, or is this more of a rough working?
I believe it is accessible online because it's part of the committee package.
It is in this case, and we can continue to do that. Oh, excuse me, please, Chair.
Yep.
We can continue to do
easy
that.
enough. I'm sorry. It'd be easy enough to take that and to put it into here's pending actions, and then. The challenge with it obviously is stuff gets really dated, and sometimes it just becomes changing activities. It becomes irrelevant sometimes. Mm-hmm. So it's important to be able to have a column in there, maybe additional column and why it's been dropped off, and then have like a people can always find the history from past stuff as well, but.
True.
But I think it's, it's something that it's important for the committee to see, because there are actions that we've put off because of the time of year or because of things were pending or something like that, and it's good to remind us to stay on board or to stay on track with some of these things. So,
Please, Chair.
Yes.
For example, the RRFB request at Dennett, that will be something that comes on here to remind us that in mid-April we want to make sure we put that camera out, so for the May meeting we'll have that data and available. So again, this is mostly for us, but I wanted to put it in here. It can be part of public record, certainly for this meeting, and it was on the agenda, so it was posted. It's also on this recording here, so people can see it.
Okay, great. I think this is great data for people to have.
Excellent.
So they know where the status
So we'll continue.
projects
Sure.
are. And then miscellaneous, we have a Woodbury traffic calming request letter submitted January 6, 2022.
So this is from a citizen that came in to speak about Woodbury Avenue at our last meeting, and she asked that this be entered into record. So,
Mr. Chairman, I can address this.
Yes.
This is a project that we've been working on. We, for some reason, there was it wasn't clear to the general public that this was an ongoing project, and that we were. So we are preparing to take action this summer. We've identified speed tables as appropriate treatments, and we've identified a number of locations along that corridor. So we're looking at that as an interim start or a starting measure, and then we'll continue to take data and adjust as we move forward. So there is action that's planned for this roadway. It has not been ignored. So it's the folks on that area should be comforted that something's going to be taking place.
Great, thank you. So I guess we would want a motion for that? Or go ahead.
Motion for that?
I'd motion to put it on file, put the correspondence on file.
Okay. Second?
Any discussion?
Second?
so roll call.
Roll call vote?
Mary Lou McElwain?
Yes.
Steve Pesci?
Yes.
Erica Wygonick?
Yes.
Police Captain Mike Maloney?
Yes.
Fire Chief Todd Germain?
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice?
Yes.
City Manager Karen Conard?
Yes.
And Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Yes. And we have next is adjournment, but I guess maybe we could have an item for miscellaneous or any other business.
Mr. Chair, yes, I'm going to request that we put on the agenda for next, I'm concerned about two developments going on, or will go on in the community. One is the skateboard park at the old stump dump, and the other is probably 105 Bartlett Street, how they impact. And I'm not sure if traffic studies have been done on those, but I'm most concerned about the skateboard park. That access to egress and egress from that site is very dangerous, whether traffic is turning to the west or to the east, or if they're coming east and they want to turn into that skateboard park. So I'd like to put it on the agenda, that bring that up for discussion, to have a traffic study of that site before the city progresses any further on that. I don't think a traffic study has been done. And
Mr. Chairman, if I may, and Mary, with all due respect, Mary Lou, it's really not the purview of this committee to be directing those types of studies to be done. There's a technical advisory committee to the planning board that does these reviews. The changes in the configurations to a roadway, it's acceptable to bring back to the committee and to have input from the committee, but the directing staff and the city to do specific studies is not the purview of this.
Well, I was
committee.
looking at the ordinance and I think that, to me, that does follow with the ordinance, the directive that we have. Under Section 7.
I can assure you that there are studies being done for those two projects.
So there are traffic studies being done for those two projects?
Correct. I believe
How do we-
105's already had a traffic study done, and it should be on the park and the planning department's records. So I believe that's already been done.
Okay. And its impact on that section of Bartlett Street?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And how about the skateboard park? I'm very concerned that that young people are going to be trying to get in and out of that very busy section of road.
I truly appreciate what you're saying, and, you know, the project has not been designed yet. It's in the process. It was, funding was approved, and we really even haven't started the design process yet.
Well, I thought under traffic safety that it was our, that we could make a suggestion to have a traffic study. So you're saying that comes under another department, but it just seems to me that is part of this committee. We're a traffic safety committee, besides parking.
I guess I appreciate what you're saying, and I don't disagree that it's appropriate for this committee, when looking at general roadway functions and things like that, that studies are appropriate to recommend. What I'm thinking that there's a where the distinction lies is specific projects that are already covered with other areas. So, I think it's a good question, and it warrants further discussion. But at this point, your concern is noted. There are studies being done for those two particular projects.
Okay, well, can those studies come to us so that we have a chance? I mean, I'm looking at this big packet that we got for 15 Middle Street. That came in front of us twice. There were many concerns, including from Eric Eby and many of us on the committee. Then all of a sudden, it was approved without coming back to us for a further discussion. So I'm concerned that happens without this committee being informed of what's going on.
Ms. Wagana?
Can I add or ask, I guess, some questions here? So my understanding is when a development comes to get permitted, it has to go before the planning board and occasionally the zoning board to get whatever permits are required. Typically, a traffic study is submitted as part of that for a larger development. I think the question that comes up to me based on Mary Lou's question is from my knowledge, the planning board, potentially the zoning board, is in charge of reviewing applications with an eye to traffic and reviewing traffic studies. The question is, how are we best meant to interact with that? Should we be participating in planning board hearings that we're concerned about, and I guess we would do that as private citizens, or do we want some sort of formal relationship where we send someone to a planning board hearing? I mean, I think my guess, I don't want to put words in Peter's mouth, but is that it doesn't make sense for us to have two different committees, two boards reviewing the same thing for effectively the same reason. So there's already a mechanism to review these applications through the planning board. Is the skate park going to have to go through the planning board? Will there be an opportunity, like could Mary Lou go to the planning board hearing and comment there?
I have not gotten to the point where we've started the design to that, to the point where where we're at with that. I know from past projects where when we had a design for the ball field, we had to go through the planning board process. So I would expect that this is the same level of project that would warrant that.
So in lieu of having it also need to come before our committee, maybe if there's a larger project, I don't know if we should just take it upon ourselves to pay attention to the planning board, or if it makes sense to kind of have an alert on our agenda of upcoming hearings that we might want to attend to. But I agree with Peter. It doesn't make sense for us to be covering a particular question under two different committees. I think the question is just how can we best support the planning board with our knowledge of traffic and safety.
Right, because I think sometimes we get a perspective from excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Oh, go ahead.
Perspective from residents that may not show up at a planning board meeting or, a technical advisory committee meeting. And so I just wonder how we get this feedback back and forth so that we understand what's going on with traffic within a certain area that we're concerned about, and we get answers back from the planning board.
I could maybe speak to that. So I understand the concerns of what I'm hearing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I look at this committee as kind of, one, addressing problems as they come up, and two, setting the rules of the road. You know, if there needs to be policy changes, we'd recommend them to the council and they'd be implemented. The planning board is a quasi-judicial board. It has a very important role that requires a lot of city resources. We certainly don't want to be duplicating efforts by having things come before us that have also gone before the planning board. If we feel that the planning board is approving things that are unsafe, then I think it would be incumbent on this committee to address the policy that allows for those types of approvals, but not to be looking at individual projects such as the skate park or 105 Bartlett, because there's already a important board that's doing that. There's nothing to preclude us as residents to speaking to projects as they come up. I don't know, it seems like it might logistically be difficult to flag items before the planning board because so many go before them. That should also be on our radar as parking, traffic, and safety. I think it's really up to us as citizens of the town to look for when those items come up on an agenda, and if we want to speak to them, to speak to them. But I don't want to, I mean, we're already without our traffic engineer, so
Right.
resources are stretched thin. I don't want to stretch those resources any thinner.
Yes, I certainly appreciate that we don't have a traffic engineer right now. Just trying to figure out how we have some feedback into these projects that have specific, for me anyway, specific safety concerns.
So,
But-
Mr. Chairman, if I
Go
may.
ahead.
Yes.
I think the chairman really summarized it correctly. There are areas that, you know, you as a resident can participate and make those comments. Typically, we get referrals from planning board when there are parking changes to ordinances that are required, whether it's an elimination of a street, change in direction of a street, elimination of parking, things that are more significant relative to the function of the city streets and things like that. The individual projects are more, there's already something baked into the process for the impacts on that. And it's not appropriate for this committee at this time. You know, that you bring up a good question. You know, what is appropriate? Where, you know, because there's more overlap of different types of things over time, and it would be probably better to clearly define where that overlap is.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, there also is overlap of staff and technical resources from a manpower perspective on the city side. So perhaps as larger projects are going on, maybe it makes sense under miscellaneous or under new business for an update to PTS from staff that may have experience or want to bring the relevant information to this committee.
Mr. Chairman, I can give an example where we're going to be coming before this committee next month to talk about the Bridge Street lot. That lot is going to get some configuration adjustment, and it's going to end up eliminating parking spaces. To do that, we need to come to this, you know, body.
Yep.
It also has tree impacts. It needs to go to the Tree and Greenery Committee. So we have to, you know, because there's the purview there. However, it does not fall into the land use level because it's an existing space and the modifications are not, they don't trip into the planning board. So there's, you know, that's the type of balance that's made. So, but there are reviews and there is public process for those types of changes.
Okay. Yes, I think as a resident, it's confusing to try and figure out at what point which board has the final say and how you know, express, as people do here, express concerns. So we can't go in front of any of those boards and speak as a parking and traffic safety committee member who would be as an individual resident because we haven't discussed it as a group. Correct?
I wouldn't deem it appropriate, but I mean.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Steve Pesci has comment.
Oh, so, go ahead, Steve. Mr. Pesci.
I think you've hit upon a lot of the points I wanted to say, but I wanted to emphasize what the city manager said. You know, contrary to maybe the public opinion we heard, the importance of having the city staff on this committee that is liaison to the other groups like the planning board. And normally we would have the planning director and the city engineer. And I think as members, we can convey our concern about corridors and projects, but a project-specific review is the planning board's purview. I think a good example I would use in the conversation today, the Kate Bartlett Hodgson, member of the public, brought up legitimately, I hope the planning board is thinking about the future integration of the Mill Pond Bikeway as it crosses that intersection. Well, there's one of these great issues that it requires a collaborated, thoughtful, long-term approach. And I think we can raise these things, but I agree to the point that this committee's purview is not to review specific projects that are in front of the planning board. That's a whole separate thing. But we certainly, by staff involvement in both, should have good communications across.
Any further comments?
I had a different miscellaneous topic.
Yes, go ahead.
It's really exciting to see Islington. It's really nice. I know it's hard when the projects are underway and people don't like the construction, but it looks really good. So good job. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Well, I just want to make my concerns evident, and I will follow up with the planning board. And I think if there's communication with our committee, that would really help us.
Great, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
So I guess we don't need a motion on any of the things we've talked about, they're just informational items. I will address just briefly, in public comment, it was mentioned, that the city employees are voting members. That's permitted by the ordinance, and I think it's very important. On the face, I think it would be a bit strange to have a parking, traffic, and safety committee where the police and the fire, city manager, planning director couldn't weigh in. They're experts in the field, and we rely on their knowledge and professionalism. So I think having them as voting members, not only is it permitted, it's I guess required isn't maybe the right word, but it's
Helpful.
It's certainly helpful. And with that, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call vote, please.
Mary Lou McCowen,
Yes.
Steve Pesci,
Yes.
Erica Wagonic,
Yep.
Police Captain Mike Maloney,
Yes.
Fire Chief Todd Germain,
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice,
Yes.
City Manager Karen Conard,
Yes.
and Chairman Bagley.
Yes.
So adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.